My name is Zach Studenroth, and I'm the director of the Sag Harbor Whaling Museum. Boy, let's see, I've been here 7 years now. We've done some interesting things. The one concern that the board shared with me was that our exhibits were somewhat static. We weren't changing, we weren't acquiring too much or making special displays. So one of the first things that we did was to empty out the largest of the gallery spaces of the permanent collections, put them wherever we could, where it seemed to make sense, and we opened up that room as a changing exhibit gallery. So in our first year, we opened a seasonal exhibit, and we've been doing something like that ever since. So that's helpful because even people like yourself who live here in town, you wouldn't necessarily think to come back to the Whaling Museum to see the same things that you remember seeing the last time you were here. So it gives us something both to show that's new, to bring new people in. It also often inspires some kind of special programming. And we're celebrating his, what do you say, it's 200th anniversary of his birth.
Okay.
Okay, in 1809. Okay, so there are a lot of museums around the country that are doing some special tributes to Lincoln. We realize that we have a very interesting, it's not the long-lost Proclamation of Emancipation. It's a wonderful little scrap of paper, that's all it ever was, with his signature on it, which of course, Lincoln's signature is a kind of a big deal, regardless of what it's on. You know? And all this amounts to, it's quite interesting, is a little request that went to the Civil War period, to a general, requesting a furlough, a temporary leave of absence for one of his soldiers, whose father was in Lincoln's employ at the White House. So there's no explanation as to why the president wanted this young fellow to be let out of the service for a little while. You know, maybe there was a sickness in the family. We don't really know what the circumstances are. We haven't researched it. We acquired it back in the 1960s, I believe. I don't have it in the top of my head, but we do have an attribution to who the donor was. I don't know the circumstances for why it came to the village, to Sag Harbor. It was definitely a local object that someone had in their possession. These things probably came back from the war in somebody's equipment, and because of it having his signature, it was saved all these years. It was on exhibit from time to time. Any piece of paper like that that's handwritten is also subject to fading and degrading, so we don't like to keep those kinds of things on exhibit all the time. The other object is something that we borrowed. It's an engraving, so it's not an original, but it's basically a period engraving that is the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, but done in very fine calligraphy. So the weight, this would be an ink pen of the period. The weight of the ink makes his portrait, and the text is the Emancipation Proclamation. So this was basically, you might call it a mourning picture. In other words, this is something that you would buy after his assassination to remember him, the great president, and one of his great accomplishments. So it's a very interesting picture that captures the sense of mourning of the loss of the president in the period. That's actually from a private collector whom I knew, and when we had, whoever comes to the museum to see Lincoln's signature will see it's a very small piece. It's like a little notepad. So we thought we really need something a little more showy, and this is a very special, it's a fairly rare print.